Record. So welcome again, whether you're participating live or checking back in on the recording. Special welcome to Joel, Mark, and Antonia, who are our speakers on the topic of mastering life through your auxiliary function. They're the co-founders of Personality Hacker, experts in personal growth through personality type, and they help individuals unlock their potential through their podcast, coaching, workshops, blending theory with practical tools for real-life transformation. So over to you.
Thank you, Jerry, and thanks everybody for being here. This is fantastic. I'm Joel. This is Antonia. We're excited to be here to share with you today. We obviously thank you, Jerry, for the introduction. We run a company called Personality Hacker. Been doing this since 2010. Been doing coaching and content and teaching and working with personality types and people. We've been doing a podcast, very popular podcast called the Personality Hacker Podcast since 2014. And really every week tuning into how to take personality types and make them very real in your life. Like if we're going to learn all this theory, all this information, all of this understanding around personality type, well, what is that actually going to mean in a real lived way? I think that's preoccupies our mind and it preoccupies the work that we do with people in order to help them through the coaching and things. And I just really appreciate right before the session started talking with Jerry and what BAPT is up to, both the in-person and online conferences. We're just so grateful that there's a gathering of people here with the energy, attunement, enthusiasm, the understanding and the desire to see personality types continue. As the world gets more and more digital and we go on to Zoom calls more and more and people, there's a lot of hostilities in the world. There's a lot of misunderstandings and differences that we can see between each other. But we have a shared language with personality type. We've got a way to see each other and see our world as humans that no matter what happens with the technology, artificial intelligence, all the things that might be like, oh, what's going to happen with all this? There's a human understanding that we all have when we understand personality type. It's so beautiful because we possess it within ourselves. And I think it helps us no matter what's going to be coming down the pike. So today we want to do is we want to tune into a little bit of a practical way that we can use personality type in our lives in a much more, self-parenting way. We want to talk to you about some concepts. We're going to give some content out here. And Tony's going to do most of the teaching here and talk about some key ideas. And then if we get some time, we'll give some examples, and then we'd love to have some discussion, conversation, some question and answer, some discussion, some ideas of your own you might want to share of what comes up for you in this session today.
I'm going to do my best to make sure that we have the time for that because I have a tendency to over-prepare. And so if we do have time at the end, I'd like to give some examples, maybe some case studies or examples of what we're talking about, but we'll see. We'll see if we have time. But we wanted to share this concept that emerged through years of coaching. It's a way of taking some of the models that have already been developed around Jungian cognitive functions and type to bring in an understanding of like how can we build a relationship with our like the parts of ourselves so that we can maybe reclaim some of our authority and our power back. We have a tendency to hand a lot of our own personal sovereignty over to other people. And there's a lot of different ways to look at that. How do we get personal power? How do we get self-authority? But we are a personality hacker, which means that we're always looking for hacks, right? How does an understanding of our cognition allow us to have an on-ramp to some of these concepts, and particularly self-parenting? Because self-parenting is it's a bit of a buzz term, right? We hear a lot about self-parenting and in internal family systems and other concepts, and we feel like personality type and archetypes give us a map for it. So we're gonna not look at the typology, but sort of the topography of it. We're going to do an overlay of this map system to see if we can use an understanding and an awareness of our personality types in order to create some of that sovereignty back into our life.
Yeah. Feel free to use the chat to talk about ideas as we talk. It won't bother us at all if you have some ideas you want to offer as we're going through this. And if you got questions, start to think about the ways that we could have a discussion maybe at the end of this too, as you get some ideas as we go through it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So why self-parenting? Why is this a good thing? Well, just like when we're raised as children, their purpose is to help us become, as Carl Jung would say, fit for life. Good parenting gives us not just physical care, but it also gives us an ability to understand emotional regulation, guidance in our life, protection, especially as we're very young. It helps protect us from physical things, but as we get older, it helps us create protections around other things that are dangerous in our as in our developmental journey.
And by the way, we're going to make these slides available at the end of the session as well, just so you know. So you don't have to furiously take notes if you're wondering. We'll make these available for everyone too.
All right, I should have said that at the beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't. All right, thank you for
Yeah, I just thought people furiously right. Yeah, I was making sure.
Right. You'll have these, we promise. All right. So protection, affirmation, so that we have a healthy self-esteem and a sense of understanding ourselves, and a feeling of certainty. Now, this is a key concept that we're going to fillet out in a little bit, but a feeling of certainty is a big part of why we lean on our actual parents, right? We don't know what's going on. We're kids. We rely on them to help create a sense of like, it's going to be okay. Like, even if there's a lot of unknowns in the world, we can still lean on them to help develop certainty. But when parts of ourselves are underparented, right, especially our most vulnerable parts, like our approval-seeking aspects, not all of the parts of ourselves grow up on their own. All right, so if our parents missed something, a valuable lesson, something maybe they weren't tuned into, or we just didn't get that lesson because time and circumstance, then there are parts of us that stay developmentally frozen. All right, and when that happens, we start scanning the outside world outside of us for sources that will provide the reassurance, the approval, and the certainty that we did not get when we were younger. And the thing is that even when we have perfect parenting, all right, so most of us did not have perfect parents, all right? Most of us had valuable lessons that our parents were not tuned into, or maybe even obstructed our ability to understand. And so we have to do a fair amount of self-parenting on our own. But even if our parents were almost flawless in every way, we still have an eternal child aspect of ourselves. In archetypal terms, this is the part of us that is innocent. This is our playful element, our vulnerable element, and it looks for protection and guidance, and it has a drive for emotional security and unconditional love. So even if we learned all the lessons, it doesn't mean that that archetypal element of an eternal child goes away. We still have it inside of us. So our eternal child seeks validation, whether it's parts of ourselves that did not learn vital lessons, or if it's just the eternal child archetype inside of us. This part of us is seeking validation, worthiness, and certainty from wherever it can get it, all right? And that's why we have a tendency to scan the outside world seeking parenting effectively. But self-parenting shifts this. It shifts the authority from outside of ourselves back to within, right? We're the source now of it. So instead of reacting to external approval or criticism from other people, we become responsive to our own internal standards and values. So the concept of self-parenting helps us stop outsourcing our need for approval and a feeling of certainty to other people. And that's effectively what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about using type as a map for understanding how we can bring self-parenting back in-house effectively and not outsource it to others. What we're going to do is we're going to use cognitive functions. The concept of particularly the first 4 functions are dominant, auxiliary, tertiary, and inferior, alongside of Dr. John Beebe's archetypes, that 8-function model to self-parent. Now, if you're unfamiliar with John Beebe's 8-function model, I highly recommend going and checking it out. It's been sort of a platform for a lot of my understanding of how type works, not just in a theoretical way, but in a practical healing and therapeutic way. So we're going to steal and borrow a little bit of his concept of the archetypes that are inside of us, and we're going to marry that to our own functions in order to understand how to do this self-parenting better.
Jerry was telling us about the core values of BAPT when we were talking right before we started, and he talked about 2 of them are inclusivity and accessibility. And so when we start talking about the personality cognitive functions, one of the things that we use is a model that we've called the CAR model. It's just an easy way for us to make this accessible to new people often. And so we've given the different technical names, other names we've overlaid on this. Now, we're not going to go into our CAR model. We're just making a reference to this so you understand where we're coming from and what we've used before. We're actually going to assume that everyone here can use the technical names, understanding the functions at their level. We even have nicknames for the cognitive functions to help new people that just need access to get started. And so if you ever see something in Personality Hacker, you'll understand that the dominant we've called a driver, auxiliary co-pilot, tertiary a 10-year-old, and inferior a 3-year-old. There's reasons we call it this. We're not going to go into all that detail. But this is a great metaphor for people, especially when they're starting. And because it's a quadrant, it helps us really get an idea of how these functions are applied. So it's a really good map to use too. So we're going to use the map, but we're going to go into the technical definitions now because we assume everyone here at BAPT has a more familiarity with it than maybe somebody just starting out new.
Right, exactly. All right, so in the In the late 80s, early 90s, Dr. John Beebe John was coming up with this idea of an 8 archetype model. He started talking about it in the late 80s. He ended up writing a book called Integrity in Depth, where he outlines that certain archetypes, Jungian archetypes, are associated with specific cognitive functions in their place. For the dominant function, he called it a hero archetypal energy. For the auxiliary, he called it a parent energy. For the tertiary, he called it an internal child energy, and for the 3-year-old, he called it an anima, or if you are a woman, an animus. All right, and each of these archetypes encourage the functions depending upon what they are for us, because of course, depending upon our best fit type, we have different functions in these positions, but the energy remains the same. The hero is a part of ourselves that we just kind of assume is the right tool for the job. The parental energy is one that tends to show up in a more nurturing and responsible role. The eternal child, as we've already talked about, is the archetype that shows up vulnerable and playful and seeking reassurance. And the inferior, the anima or animus, is the part of ourselves that we must integrate because it's almost like we tend to other it. And there's elements in there that we have to sort of find inside of ourselves. Now, literally entire books have been written about these archetypes, and so we're not going to do a deep dive into all of them. But the reason why we wanted to show you this is because there's already a map here. All right, there's already a topography around understanding how to self-parent. These archetypes give us a way to at least begin the process of self-parenting through elements of ourselves we are already aware of and know, specifically that auxiliary cognitive function, that is our parental energy. When I first learned this, I was like, why? Why is the auxiliary function the parent? And why is the tertiary function the eternal child? Like how does that make sense that these are the parts of ourselves that are parental and childlike? And then after a little bit of noodling over it and talking to John and coming up with sort of some of our own understandings and awarenesses of type, it struck me that it's actually a marriage of 2 different models, 2 different ways of looking at type that help us understand why these are our parental and eternal child energies. So we're going to talk about why they are, and that will give a bit of a basis on how to start doing self-parenting. So first we're going to talk about excuse me. Thank you.
There's a glass of water.
Cheers. All right. First, we're going to talk about John Beebe's concept of the axis of relating. Now, the axis of relating is a way of separating out functions based on whether or not they help us or instinctively show up in our relationship to ourselves versus whether they show up as instinctively in our relationship to other people. So in his model, he sees that the dominant and the inferior, or the hero and the anima or animus, the left side of the car, we call it, is the axis of relating to self. He also calls it the spine of personality. And when I think of axis of relating to self, I just think of the phrase, this is mine for me. All right. So my relationship to these functions, that's me. All right. And I'm going to self-relate with these. I'm going to see these as my relationship to myself, and I don't really need other people's input, or maybe I'm just not even going to take it. One of the ways I see this is I don't think you can be insulted in your dominant function. If somebody tries to insult you, think about your dominant function and think about somebody trying to insult you and say that you're bad at that.
Like, say you're an INTJ. Like, you can't come up with synthesis. You can't really imagine the future very well or get into other people's perspectives. You're terrible at this.
You suck at that.
You'd be like, what? Like, that doesn't even make any sense.
Right.
Like, you just kind of shrug it off. Like, okay.
It's kind of go,
whatever you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I do think that we can be rejected, right? Somebody can say that those things are not important or they're not valuable. And so we can be rejected in our first function, but can't really be insulted in our first function. And that's because we don't really care what other people's opinion is of this part of ourselves. This is my relationship for me. And I didn't really ask you, did I? So that's the left side of the car. And in the same way, in our inferior function, nobody can really reassure us here. If we're feeling really bad about this part of ourselves and somebody goes, no, you're doing a really good job, we would love to be able to lean on their reassurance, but we just can't, right? We're just going to be like, no, I suck. All right. So that's the left side of the card. That's the axis of relating to self. Conversely, on the right side, you've got the axis of relating to others. Now, this is about our relationship to the outside world and our relationship to other people. And that means that we have a tendency to not really dip into this part of ourselves until another energy shows up. And then suddenly we are relating to them using primarily our auxiliary and our tertiary function. So we're going to really dive into this because, as mentioned before, this creates a model, okay? This parent and eternal child energy. That axis of relating to others means that these two functions show up naturally in our interactions, our societal roles, and our interpersonal dynamics. And they are instinctively outward facing. That means that they try to nurture, try to impress, try to support, or try to seek approval from other people. And so our parental energy, interestingly enough, is not instinctively used for the self. It's instinctively used for other people. One way that I always see this showing up is particularly for people who have intuition as a second function, as an auxiliary, like INP and ENJ types. I've noticed that if somebody comes to them seeking advice and they go, man, I just can't figure out what I'm supposed to do. I just do not understand what I'm supposed to do with my life. That intuition flares up and you like almost immediately have like a plan for their life. They're like, no, no, no. There are all these things that you could be doing. Have you considered this? Have you considered this? Or they run a simulation into the future about what could be happening. But when it comes to themselves and their plan for their own life, it's almost like it kind of flatlines. It's like, what should I be doing? In this way, we have a tendency to use that second function in behalf of other people when it kicks on, and less so in behalf of ourselves. So the dominant hero, the auxiliary parent, the tertiary eternal child, and the anima animus each have a different sort of style of operating.
Yeah, we used to talk about this a long time ago when we started our podcast. We used to say, really, these are descending orders of ability, of competence, of capability, sophistication, right? And I think that can sort of map, but it wasn't exactly right. We started to evolve it through coaching and all that. We actually got more fidelity to it and realized it's not just about capacity. We thought, well, maybe it's about interest. And we talked about it being interest. You're going to be more interested in things that are maybe your dominant function and your auxiliary than you would tertiary or inferior, but not really, because there can be a lot of interest maybe around topics or energies or things you can attune to with even your inferior function. You can even build a lot of skill there. So we started to think about this in a lot of different terms than just interest or capability.
Yeah. And at one point, it sort of struck us that what's happening is less about skill, it's less about sophistication, it's less about interest, and it's more about, and this is our second model, it's actually more about certainty. All right. So certainty is one of those feelings that humans are constantly seeking. Now, certainty is a little bit different than things that are known. Some of us are pre-wired to be okay with the unknown, right? Like Joel and I both have ENP preferences. The unknown doesn't really bother us that much. It's sometimes an exciting adventure. And there are other types that feel the same way. But regardless of our relationship to known and unknown, we all want to feel certain. For example, or for instance, if we go into the unknown, we want to feel certain that we can rely on ourselves to navigate through that, right? I don't have to know it. I just have to be able to rely on myself to show up the way that the context asks me to show up. I need to feel certain in my capacity. Whereas uncertainty is one of the worst feelings we can have. When we experience uncertainty, all of a sudden now we're like, we end up in analysis paralysis. We end up doubting ourselves. We end up feeling a lack of confidence. And so one thing that really struck out is how much certainty we feel in our first function versus the certainty that we feel in, say, our inferior function. So this is the second model, or the second topography over sort of outline we're going to put over it, which is that type could be called a descending order of certainty. Our dominant function is overconfident in its certainty. That's why the hero is called the hero, right? It assumes that it's gonna battle the dragon and succeed. It's gonna, trot into the village on a horse and on a steed, and all of the villagers are going to throw roses, and everybody's going to say, wow, you did an amazing job. That's our relationship to our hero function. That's why we always think it's the best tool for the job, and why we tend to gravitate towards it so much is not just capacity, not just talent, not just skill, but a sense of certainty. I know who I am when I'm here, right? I know I know I can navigate life with this function. When we get to the auxiliary function, this is less about our relationship to ourselves. It's more about our relationship to others. So our certainty is a little bit more modest. We want to watch how we show up. We want to kind of see how we end up engaging and interacting. We still feel a pretty decent amount of certainty, but we also are a little less overconfident here. We're a little bit more skill-based. We don't assume we're going to be good, but we have a sense that we probably will be. So now we just need to get a little bit more skill there. When we get to the eternal child, this is the first time cognitively that we experience uncertainty. All right, this is the first time we don't think we can necessarily just rely on ourselves. But because it's part of the axis of relating to others, what we end up doing is we end up trying to borrow certainty from other people, right? We're seeking reassurance here to make it so that we feel a little bit better. But the inferior function, by the time we get there, we are deeply uncertain, right? And because this is back to the axis of relating to self, this is my relationship with me, I can't borrow certainty from anybody. Like if I feel uncertain here, I just feel uncertain. And a lot of times we allow this feeling to throttle ourselves. It's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to really tap into this part of who we are and integrate it, is because part of integration of this function is making peace with the sense of uncertainty that we experience when we get there.
And doing it anyway.
And doing it anyway. Exactly. And so the second theme is this descending order of certainty. So the first theme is the axis of relating to self versus others. And the second piece is this descending order of certainty. All right. So we have this two different styles of looking at the same functions, that we are instinctively using them for others, and they are at two different levels of certainty. And it creates almost like an equation, all right? Parental energy means relating to others, but having a modest sense of certainty. You could almost see it like the responsible part of us. And what ends up emerging is a supportive parental authority, right? Like, I've figured this out, kid, right? Like I went through it myself. And it took a little while, but I've learned my lessons over time and I've built skill, and I'd like to share this wisdom with you. That's why this function shows up parentally, right? It's not overconfident. It doesn't make assumptions, but it kind of goes, I've been here before, or I've covered this territory and I want to share what I've learned with you. It comes with a sense of responsibility and wisdom. Whereas the eternal child energy, if you do the same equation, you've got the relating to other people, but you've also got the uncertainty that comes along with being in an eternal child energy. And so this is the childlike part of us because there's a need for external security that shows up in this function. So what ends up happening, or really, if you take all of this topography into account and recognize that we have a tendency to push both of these outward, right? Our auxiliary function, again, kicks up when somebody comes and asks us advice or can't figure this part out. And we go, hey, I've got wisdom to share. And we find ourselves saying a lot of things that we've, sort of culled from our auxiliary function. Or we need to borrow some certainty. We're feeling uncertain. We don't know what to do. And so we're looking and scanning to the outside world to try to give us that sense of reassurance. We think that self-parenting means going from this to this. All right. It means turning those energies, as opposed to simply being kicked on in behalf of other people or in a relationship to other people, bringing it back in-house, creating a direct line relationship between our parental energy and our eternal child energy.
This is key. Don't miss this. What we're talking about here is directional, and it's something that's it's a very simple concept. This is a lifetime of work, what we're talking about, but it's not a very complex concept. But self-parenting means that all of these things that we're normally just naturally going to be directing outward, we start to look and say, how can I direct this inward and ensure that the parts of me are working together in tandem to create better results in my life?
Exactly. So our parental energy self-parents, the tertiary specifically, by offering steady guidance, approval, and modest certainty from within. It helps the eternal child feel secure without needing constant reassurance from the outside world. So instead of this function getting kicked on by the outside world, we need to be scanning for opportunities for ourselves when we need reassurance, when we're showing up childlike, when we tend to hand our power over to others in order to gain approval or a sense of safety, that there is a part of us that already very powerfully does this, has built skill over time, and now it needs to start being turned in on the self.
Yeah. As a very personal example from my life, I have ENFP preferences. That means that my auxiliary is introverted feeling or authenticity. My tertiary is extroverted thinking or the ability to get things done, execute in the outer world. And my little eternal child, especially in the early days of personality hacker, was all about, I got to have the business stuff down. That's what I'm going to be proud of. That's what people are going to notice about me. And I would get really like weird about it, right? I get a little bit neurotic about this. And it was only when I started to say, wait a second, what are the values here that I'm helping to guide in? It's not about the business structure and all the smart business things I can bring. It's about what we're here to do to tune into people. And that's a really hard balance. My proving energy wanted to get all this approval from the outside world about the structure and all the things I could do. And really, the self-parenting came in and said, but what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What's the point of this? It's about, you can't say personality without person in the word, right? This is about people. This isn't about business structure. This isn't about making money or having all these external markers of success. This is about helping, guiding people to maybe their innermost true selves, which is a very introverted feeling concept. So tuning that parental energy helped me calm that part down, quiet it, like set that neurosis aside and be a little bit more present to my life. And it's been a lifetime work. Like it's a lot. I'm still in the process of it. I think this is a lifetime endeavor for all of us.
Yeah, what was the game Othello? There was a game, I don't know if this was an international game, but in the United States, way back in like the 80s or 90s, there was a commercial for a game called Othello, which was a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. And this concept of self-parenting is a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. So what we're basically sort of paring down in a few easy to read slides with some arrows pointing in certain directions is actually a communication on a lot of personal development and inner growth. There's a lot here. But that said, the beauty of it is that now you don't have to, when you've got this part, the eternal child's feeling uncertain, when the eternal child is feeling needy, as opposed to scanning the outside world, looking to borrow certainty, looking to try to figure out, you know, who can give me the head pat, who can make me feel better about this. It turns inward. It learns to trust the inner parent as a guide and to gain stability without depending on that external validation. And for me personally, this happened when I left the religion of my youth. There was a lot of me, because I have ENTP preferences. My extroverted feeling function, my extroverted feeling tertiary or eternal child, it could not take the reputational hit. It wanted to maintain those relationships even if they weren't healthy. And so I ended up doing a lot of handing my relational power over to others, as opposed to bringing it in-house. And when my introverted thinking auxiliary function finally sort of kicked on and went, maybe I should be taking responsibility for my life. Maybe I need to enter a new phase, a less childlike and more parental element. Then I realized that I had actually been handing my brain over effectively. I was not thinking in terms of core principles for myself. I wasn't thinking in terms of what made the most sense. I started recognizing all of my cognitive biases. And so now when my extroverted feeling aspect, when the part of me wants to be seen as compassionate or cool or somebody who is really connected or has these great relationships, I make sure to first check in with my parental introverted thinking and go, am I handing too much of myself over to others? Am I am I staying unbiased in my own approach and thought? And is maybe there a truth that needs to be said at this time? Maybe I'm hiding something that is important to say just because I'm trying to maintain the relationship and get the head pat of connection. And so this is a huge paradigm shift. It was a massive paradigm shift for both Joel and I. And we've noticed in our coaching that it tends to be a big paradigm shift in our coaching clients as well. All right.
Let's talk about some examples.
Yeah, we have time. I can't believe it.
These are some hypothetical examples just to give you a sense of maybe how we could apply this other different ways besides just myself and Antonia. Let's jump into these.
Okay, that sounds good.
We'd love to take questions and discussion too, if that's something people are ready. So start queuing those up. Love to get a discussion going.
Okay, so these are going to be really overarching examples, okay? And I've chosen two types that I think would probably be well represented here. But there's other ways of looking at this as well. And again, it's going to require a little bit of self-reflection for you to figure out how your functions are showing up in your life, because we're not all the same, right? Just because we share the same type preferences doesn't mean we have the same experiences, the same relationship to our functions, even maybe the same interests falling within them. So you will have to do a little bit of self-reflection on this one. But that said, let's head for the IFJs, right? They tend to be at a lot of conferences, so we're going to go straight there. So what parental energy would an IFJ have? Well, that would be extroverted feeling, and the child energy would be introverted thinking. So let's just pick on an INFJ and let's pretend her name is Sophie. All right. All right. So Sophie's in a team meeting at work. She's been asked to present her idea from improving a customer service process, and she's done her homework. Her idea is thoughtful, but it's not perfectly bulletproof. There's still a few unknowns. As she starts presenting, a teammate immediately challenges a small part of her logic. And so Sophie's eternal child, introverted thinking, flares up. I have to defend every detail perfectly. If I can't, they'll think I'm incompetent or haven't thought it through. Instead of staying centered, she suddenly starts over-explaining and getting flustered. She throws out way more information than needed, trying to sound airtight. But now she's confusing the room and undermining her own point. All right, so this would be a moment of extrovert or the eternal child energy feeling a sense of uncertainty. Somebody kind of pressed. She didn't feel like she immediately had something she could say. She hadn't thought it all the way through, right? And there tends to be a little bit of perfectionism in this function, or can be. It's not a rule, but it is a trend. And so in this moment, she doesn't feel like she's airtight. And now she's seeking approval, okay? So she's over-explaining. She's trying to get that head pat that she's done well. But there's another option that she could be using, and that is to bring that energy up to her extroverted feeling parent. All right. This is a part of her that might be able to calm that part down with reassurance. If she can self-parent through her auxiliary extroverted feeling, she can lean into it by reminding herself, my value isn't about perfect logic. It's about connecting with the group, offering insight, and collaborating. It's okay if I don't have all the answers yet. Then when challenged, instead of panicking, she smiles warmly and says, that's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe we can figure out a solution together. So now the room feels safe and connected, and Sophie's idea moves forward with group support. She doesn't need to win through airtight logic. She wins through relational leadership, exactly what her auxiliary function was designed for. So that parental energy, of course, in this case of Sophie, she'll have had to already have developed this mechanism, meaning that this is already a muscle she's using, right? She already, when she gets in these moments of her eternal child energy going, right? Like, maybe I didn't do good enough. If she's been doing this work of immediately handing that approval over to her extroverted feeling can remind her of what the important thing is. Connection, relationship, relational leadership, right? It's not really about having all your ducks in a row with logic. It's about making sure that people can understand things enough in order for all of us as a team to move forward. Let's try an ITP example. I figured there's probably INTPs in the audience, so we'll go for that. So the parental energy, right, comes from extroverted intuition, and the eternal child energy comes from introverted sensing. So imagine an INTP named Leo. Leo's brainstorming ideas for a startup with a few friends. His mind is firing with possibilities, creative, innovative, seeing future trends no one else sees. But then someone asks a simple question. Have you mapped out exactly how this would work in practice? Suddenly, Leo's eternal child flares up, right? Introverted sensing thinks you don't have enough concrete details. You didn't think about the history, the steps, the proven models. You're irresponsible for missing practical realities. So feeling rattled, Leo shrinks back, gets defensive, or abruptly abandons the idea, overwhelmed by a flood of past failures or imagined disapproval. All right. So in this moment, now Leo is going to have an instinct to keep things small, manageable, small enough where his introverted sensing might have all of the answers up front. So what's the problem with that? Well, now the idea gets small. But if the mechanism of self-parenting has already been built, well, then Leo, having learned how to lean into extroverted intuition, maybe it would sound a little bit more like this in response. New ideas don't have every detail mapped out at the beginning, so it's okay to stay open, adaptable, and build practical steps as I go. So when challenged about the details, instead of collapsing inward, Leo smiles and says, that's a great point. Part of the fun will be figuring that out as we move forward, leaning into extroverted intuition as a function that tends to actually work really well by laying the train tracks in front of the train while it's already in motion. That's kind of the point of the function. So having leaned into it and learned how to rely on it, you can say that with confidence, right? Staying playful, expansive, future-oriented, using extroverted intuition's exploratory nature to reassure the eternal child introverted sensing that part's uncertainty of imperfection or unknowns. So now Leo can take action without fear of the unknowns stopping him. All right. All right. So these are just some examples of how it can look. So then in some self-reflection, and we can take a minute. We actually have time. I can't believe it. To ask yourself about your tertiary function, your eternal child. How does it act up? When does it feel most uncertain? Where are you seeking external approval? Okay. When is this part of you showing up and wanting head pats from others, wanting reassurance from others that you're doing okay? And how does your eternal child limit you when it becomes uncertain? How does it shrink you back? How does it make you or keep you or throttle you from taking actions that you think you should be taking?
Bonus points if you share in the chat what's coming up for you of self-reflection. If you're brave enough to share that with others, that's bonus points. I think it helps illustrate some of the ways this might show up in our self-reflection for each other. It can stimulate other ideas for other people. Like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's probably going on for me too. So it's a good way if you're brave enough to share, we'd love to hear some of those as well.
When you feel mocked. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Because people are reflecting on this. One thing that helps me is a different question set when I'm going in. I think illustrative of these examples here, as I enter a space, I was thinking about this yesterday. I go in, I'm like, okay, what are my tasks? Extroverted thinking, right? This is again very personal for me for an ENFP, but what are my tasks? What am I going to really put pressure on myself to accomplish this week? What are my deadlines and goals? And I go, wait a second. Actually, a better question is, what kind of a person do I want to be today? And I've been trying to move that direction. I'm like, but that's not going to accomplish anything, Joel. What kind of person do I want to be today? There's actual things I have to get done this week. And those can come also. Like I can think about that. But the first thing I need to go to is to ask myself, okay, what kind of a person am I going to show up as today? That's an introverted feeling question of the attunement of it. Then after I've checked in with that, now I can go to all my tasks and to-dos and all of that because I've vetted it through my parental function first. I'm ensuring that's on board. I've given it honor. Even if it's like, oh, it's okay, just get to the task. That's good. At least I've asked it a question. I've asked that part of myself, like, what kind of a person am I going to be today? I've checked in with that to ensure that that's unlocked, that's online, and I'm giving it its honor today as a parental function.
Yeah.
And then some days it says, the kind of person we are is we're not going to be focused on tasks and accomplishments. We're going to be focused on pouring into other people or reflecting on the meaning of something. That's what we're going to do today. But I've got to get things accomplished. No, we're not going to get those done today. Today is a day for you to tune into the self and get centered. That's what you need to do. And that part of me has, because I've been exercising, it has language and voice that when I ask questions to that part of myself, it has feedback and information for me that can help with guidance in my life. Yeah. And I think that's what we're hoping for you is that you have maybe a question set, a mechanism to tune into some of the wisdom that you have, the self-parenting wisdom you're carrying with you already, exercising that muscle, maybe through kind of like AI chat prompts almost to the self. It's like you ask it a question, you get a good response. And if you refine the prompt you give it, that part of you, well, the responses come back to help you in guidance of your life. That's, I think, what it means to exercise that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, whenever I have to have a tough question or a tough conversation, rather, with another person, which I have to do, right? As somebody who runs a business, there's a lot of difficult conversations that need to be made. And my extroverted feeling doesn't want to have those conversations. It wants to stay in rapport and stay in connection and be liked and be considered charming and charismatic. I make sure that my introverted thinking reminds my extroverted feeling that the truth is a relief, right? But it has to be a complete truth. So I need to logic it through. I need to figure out what premises need to be questioned. I need to figure out why the truth is important, right? Why is it important to have this conversation and to say what needs to be said and clearly define any principles that have been offended. And when I do that, I find that I actually have really good conversations with people. Even if they're tough conversations, even if they're difficult, it's way better to just have that conversation now and get to a place that's a true win-win, honoring truth, as opposed to kicking the can down the road, allowing things to sour, sweeping things under the rug just to stay in temporary rapport, but have basically do long-term damage to the relationship. So I just make sure that my introverted thinking gets in there and reminds my extroverted feeling that actually relationships are built on truth. They're not based on just on being nice to each other. So what kinds of questions can your eternal child come up with that your responsible parent, your inner self parent, can answer in a way that's more responsible and isn't as will not hand power over to other people. But the next question I think is equally important, not just how does my eternal child act up, but what kind of parent am I? All right. If we're going to do self-parenting, a really important question is how am I going to show up as a parent? And by the way, people are saying good things in chat. I just want to acknowledge, John said that with INTP preferences, there's something about the physical quality of this stuff I produce needing to be very good, linking to sensing. I think that's a great one.
Yeah.
Sometimes that throttles action because you're not willing to kind of like do the extroverted intuition, throw spaghetti against the wall because you don't want it to be messy.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a piece of that. Jerry said, as an INTJ, I have a vision and a plan that is questioned, then I tend to feel triggered and inadequate. There's some introverted feeling child triggering that happens. Yeah. Not being able to present my wonderful ideals into proposals that some people of different types will welcome, right? Somebody who maybe has introverted sensing a little stronger, Renee said, as somebody with INFP preferences. Right. Yeah, these are all great examples of it. So what we're really talking about is not throttling actions we should be taking because of this uncertain part of who we are. Kind of making peace with the fact that there's a part of us that's always going to feel uncertain. Maybe making peace with uncertainty itself. And that also kicks over into the kind of parent we want to be when we're self-parenting. Because it's not just like every parent is good at their job, right? So what kind of parent are you? Are you permissive of your eternal child, letting it throw temper tantrums and call the shots? Okay. That could be a form of self-parenting, but it's overly permissive and it's not helping all of you become fit for life. Are you an overly harsh parent, giving your eternal child no room for mistakes, growth, or self-discovery, right? If you're an over taskmaster on this, well, then you're crushing your eternal child's spirit, right? It needs to be playful. It's vulnerable. It needs to come with some creativity and willingness to make messes. So are you giving it the space to do that? Or are you the kind of parent that helps your inner child become fit for life by keeping its curiosity, its wonder, its playfulness, but not expecting it to make life decisions or take on too much responsibility? That's not a kid's job. It's not a child's job to be making parental decisions. So if we're making life decisions, not based on our auxiliary functions wisdom, right? It's hard learned lessons. It's called wisdom over time. But we're handing over way too much power to our eternal child because it's triggered, it's uncertain, it's upset, it's seeking approval. If we're making those life decisions, we're basically putting a burden on this part of us that it cannot handle. It is a weight that it is never intended to lift. And as a parent, that would be deeply irresponsible. I mean, we've seen these, I'm sure everybody has seen a parent that gives their children outsized power. And everybody's miserable in that dynamic. The kid is because they feel totally insecure. They feel like, I don't know anything, and yet I'm supposed to be directing this whole ship. The parent is miserable because they feel disempowered. They don't feel like they can do anything. They feel impotent to the temper tantrums. And everybody just feels awful. But when the relationship turns into what it should be, with the parent shouldering the responsibility, recognizing that the child is going to feel uncertain, maybe need a minute or two of reassurance, of really taking the lead and stepping up even when it's hard. Those are the parents and children that have the best relationships. Those are the ones that last. And those are the ones that grow children into adults that are ready and prepared for life. So we can do that with ourselves, all right? We can be good parents to our eternal child energy. We can not give it outsized power, not allow it when it's triggered to make adult decisions, throttle our behavior, or have us do things that or throttle the behavior we should be doing, or maybe even take actions that we shouldn't be doing, right? We want to take that outsized power back from the eternal child, give it to the parent, and allow the child to just play. To just be a beautiful, vulnerable, creative part of ourselves that makes messes, doesn't always do the right thing, but is still there with a sense of wonder for the world. Remember, our eternal child seeks validation, worthiness, and certainty from wherever it can get it. Okay? We'll look for it anywhere. And self-parenting is the mechanism that shifts authority from outside of ourselves to within. So we're looking for this reassurance. We're going to hand it out. We're going to give it to somebody. When we give it to ourselves, now we stay back in authority. Now we stay back in a sense of sovereignty. So instead of reacting to external approval or criticism, we become responsive to our own internal standards and values. It helps us stop outsourcing our needs for approval and feelings of certainty to others, and it helps us find our personal power and self-authority.
I want to thank you, everybody here from BAPT, and Jerry for letting us be here and inviting us to talk with you today. We're excited we can take questions or we can conclude this. I'll turn it over to you, Jerry. Help guide us to what you want to do next.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, maybe if I just give a kind of formal pull it together and conclusion, and then if people want to stay on and chat, then feel free. We can certainly do that for 10, 15 minutes. We do want to make sure we're in good time for people to get to Elena's session, which should dovetail really nicely with all that you've been talking about, I think, or Sharon's session on learning to love and live with introverts. So that's one that is close to my heart, obviously. But just to say thank you again for your contributions, Joel, Mark, and Antonia. It's been fantastic to have you with us as part of this conference. There is that 30 minutes break. Do kind of just go for a walk around the garden or whatever you need to do before you rejoin. There's also the Zoom room for chatting in. I've put the link to that in the chat there. Just a couple of quick adverts on April the 16th. If you're a member of BAPT and you have plenty of time to join before then, of course, we have our AGM and our exclusive members event when Sue Blair will be leading us in thinking about how we use sensing and intuition to navigate the concrete and the complex. On the website, you can see that event and also details of our emerging program for the coming year. And there are plenty of other conversations and events to sign up for. We'd love to have those conversations with you. Finally, our face-to-face event this year, we're partnering with the Center for Leadership in Copenhagen in Denmark. And we have lots of thought leaders in the Type Community book in for that event, including Joel, Mark, and Antonia. So we will see them there. And it's an amazingly low price for a great event. And if you haven't been to Copenhagen, I'm sure it's a great place for a weekend together. So please stay and chat for a few minutes if you'd like. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next session or in the dedicated Zoom chat room.